Hello, ngHouston. So we're back tonight, and I'm secretly super excited. And I've been trying to keep my mouth shut about this episode because it's going to be cool, and I'm trying to let it be a surprise. But I'm kind of nerding out over here. So, but I'm going to let Chris tell you because all I know is it's super cool. Sorry, I got to mute my other screen here. Okay, so let's introduce the panel. Denny, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Denny, ngHouston member and presenter from time to time. I work for Servient, an e-discovery company here in Houston, where I do UI for their product.
And Denny's also the mastermind of our Angular JS upgrade series, which is going on Tuesdays, and that's been pretty cool. So Denny's becoming a real regular around here. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Denny. You're easy tonight. You don't have to present tonight. You just get to sit back.
That's right.
Okay, and we have Justin Willis. Justin, I'm excited because I've been following you on Twitter for a while. I'm a big fan, and I haven't actually met you yet. So I'm really glad that you're on the panel tonight. I hope you're going to come back pretty soon because you're pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Nice to meet you. So I'm Justin Willis. I am Dev Relations for Ionic. So yeah, Twitter, I am on it 100% of the time. So yeah, you've probably seen me on Twitter before.
I have, and actually, I think I had a question about Ionic, and I was stuck, and you answered me and helped me, and I was like, oh, he's cool. So yeah. If you have an Ionic question, be sure to tag Justin. He will answer everyone's questions.
Or DM me. My DMs are open, so yeah, feel free.
That's awesome. And Rob, you're like one of us now, Rob. I feel like you're like an adopted Houston person. You don't live in Houston, but it's always good to see you. So we know who you are by now, but introduce yourself anyway.
Hi, I'm Rob Helgeson. I work for a company called America Tire Distributors, and we just about 2 weeks ago got funding approval for my Angular project. We're looking to do a fairly sizable Angular project to convert an old green screen app, if you can believe that, all the way forward to Angular. So I'm just trying to dive in everywhere I can. Everything Angular is interesting to me. And so I'm going to represent, I guess, the newbies for Ionic because I have very little knowledge about it. So I'll be asking all the dumb questions today.
Actually, you and Denny both, because Denny's just about to start in Angular. Yeah, hey, we're all beginners about something. I was learning something new last week and was totally confused. So yeah, you guys feel free to ask questions. And also we have people in the live chat. And if you're in the live chat and you're watching, feel free to ask questions in the live chat. And we'll try to get those in too. So yeah. So Chris, that leaves you. I'm super excited. And we talked about this, and you were just going to come on and kind of do an Ionic presentation. We put you on the calendar a while back, but then you have this cool thing that you've been working on and decided to demo it. So I'm just going to shut up and let you talk because I'm pretty excited to see this.
Well, it's great to be on again. I was a panelist a while back. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to thing at the end. So really what I do is I actually want to talk about a couple sort of advanced Ionic things that have been kicking around. But since we have to refocus, to Ionic, I'll share my screen. Oh, there it is. So we just kind of run through, Ionic and get everyone kind of level set so we know what we're talking about. And Justin, since he's now in the DevRel role, he can make sure I don't say anything wrong. So,
I'll try.
So let me give a little background on me. So my day job, actually, I'm the UX lead for a home automation, home security company out here in California, San Diego. And sort of my latest claim to fame, and with $3 a cup of coffee, is I wrote mobile app development with Ionic 2, really Ionic now, the revised edition's out from O'Reilly. So it's
I have that book. That's a really good book, actually.
Yeah, we just released a revised edition, which covers a lot of little subtle changes between 2 and 3. We don't know what we're doing with the impending 4 release, how we're going to handle that. We're excited for that, but that's another presentation for another day. I am an Adobe community professional, mostly dealing with PhoneGap, Cordova, as well as Adobe XD, so I've drunk some of their Kool-Aid. Actually, I have a couple of courses out on Lynda, on PhoneGap and Cordova, so that's kind of my background I've actually been a prototyper for 20-odd years. As a friend once said, it's a great job. You get paid to write spaghetti code for a living, so it's a lot of fun. So what's Ionic? Some people know about it, some people don't hear on the talk. And really, this is kind of their mission statement, is focusing on building your app and not how it should work. And especially with hybrid applications, you were sort of having to Frankenstein a lot of stuff together. And what's nice is Ionic has taken a lot of that workload away from us. So how do they do that? Well, right now, the answer is right now, and I know Justin's smiling in the background. Right now, the business side of the Ionic world lives on top of the shoulders of Angular. So, Ionic has been around for a number of years. They actually, go back to the AngularJS world with Ionic 1. And really at that time, the only way for the Ionic team to sort of create mobile UI components, because that was sort of the missing secret sauce of PhoneGap and Cordova, which I'll kind of get into a little bit. But Cordova gave us a lot of capabilities, web developers, to get to the mobile, except we didn't have a UI layer, and that was always a struggle. We could use jQuery Mobile, which wasn't great. We tried to roll our own, and then you learn that writing components is really, really hard. And, it never worked well. Then, Ionic kind of burst on the scene, and, the angels sang, and the sunlight came down from heaven and such. But Angular was really what let them sort of take the HTML technology language and extend it to mobile components. Because unfortunately, the web was originally built to read physics papers. And there's nothing wrong with that. My degree's in physics. But it's kind of gone beyond, reading about, spins of quarks and muons and that sort of thing. So that's what the Angular part of the world is. And also that's why, it works very well in a lot of ways. On the visual side, they do SaaS because, as much as either Google or iOS would like, and Apple would like to believe that there's only one mobile platform in the world, we know there isn't. But this is the way we can have that, a tab is a tab is a tab from that UX layer. This is how we get around that UI layer problem of having that tab look right on each platform. And thanks to, some awesome folks in Madison, Florida, Brandy.
Brandy's all, Brandy is a CSS genius.
She is a CSS goddess. Really takes away, a lot of the nuances without deeply diving and looking at all right, is that a 4-pixel drop shadow or a 3-pixel drop shadow? So, but by doing that, we can then easily leverage and move forward and apply our own, our own corporate branding, whatever our style wants to be. And the little guy under the hood is this Apache Cordova PhoneGap. Now, I may flip back and forth the term interchangeably. For the most part, they are interchangeable. Apache Cordova is the official open source name. PhoneGap is the trademarked Adobe name. And I give it a whole story behind that. Or, meet me at PhoneGap Day in New York City next month, and I can, tell you over a beer. But it really allows us to take our web technologies and wrap them in a native shell and have access to the phone. So what it does is it bridges the gap between the web and the native on your phone. Gap. So now you know the story. So, this is what's under the hood for the native app side. The website, that we don't necessarily have to worry about the Cordova side. So how it all comes together. So basically, it's like a tiramisu of technologies, and the Ionic team sort of helps solve this tiramisu. So top layer, really, your app is built upon that Ionic layer, basically your user interface components, tabs, buttons, forms, slideshows, all the things you would need, alerts, to have that UI layer. That's all living on top of the Angular layer. That's handling all your business logic, going out and fetching stuff from Firebase, doing all the behind the scenes, the model work. And then all that lives on top of this web view, and through Cordova, you can talk to your phone. All that gets bundled up into a native app and into the App Store. And we're all filthy rich, right? So part of what Ionic brings to the table is, like I was saying earlier about SaaS stuff, is this concept of platform continuity. A tab is a tab is a tab. But iOS people are going to want something different. Android people want it to look something different. So as a author of an Ionic application, I don't have to worry about it. Ionic is going to handle some of that for me. So it's like, you know, I can just get moving, especially in the prototype phase. Boom, knock this stuff out in a much simpler fashion. So buttons are going to look like the right kind of buttons, you know, depending on your platform. Headers are going to look right, you know, centered or to the left, all following the human interface standards of each of the platforms. I just say header, boom, it solves it for me. I'm not sitting there having to think about it. You know, if I want a card, just going to get a card. If I want a date time picker, I'm going to get a date time picker that looks right. I want a segment widget, boom, segment widget. So all these are all built in to the component library for Ionic. Now, right now, they're all Angular directives, and we're starting to see that with the next version of Ionic, Ionic 4, these are actually going to start moving in as native web components, which is going to be really awesome. So even though we all here, you know, have drunk some of the Angular Kool-Aid, you know, we're actually going to be able to expand outside of our Angular world and say if we want to play with React or Vue or something else, we can, while still leveraging our knowledge of Ionic. So things like this, loaders, you know, all the stuff we would, you know, need to build a standard things. And it's not just mobile. We're actually able to expand out the library into sort of tablets as well as onto the desktop, especially with the sort of the rise of progressive web apps where we have a lot more physical screen that we can play with. So this is a simple split pane mock-up I did for a flight finder. And it's using a basic standard master detail type pattern. But, you know, on a tablet or on a desktop, it's all working fine, all inside Ionic. If I went to a small screen, it moves down into the hamburger menu type UX pattern. So, and for those who are not visual designers, this is great. I actually promote this even outside of the Ionic world. There's the Ionicon library, which is a fantastic font icon set. So, you know, if you have trouble drawing a straight line in Photoshop with the Shift key held down, you know, you can grab these icons and start, you know, wireframing and moving forward.
I love those icons.
Yeah, it's a great set. Ben's done a great job with them.
Yep. Shout out to Ben, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a Photoshop, definitely.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I really want to talk about sort of three things today. One, I want to talk about how Ionic really plays and can move into progressive web apps. We'll talk about and then two of my other little projects. One's the Ionic Mocks, and one is the Secret Surprise. Let's save that to the end, like a good showman should. So progressive web apps is a concept really heavily promoted by the folks at Google, and is really starting to gain traction elsewhere. And what it's allowing us to do is progressively take a web app and through other technologies start to blur that line between a native app and just a web page. In part, what we're seeing is, you know, as the browsers keep better and better. In fact, one of the mission statement for Cordova is to put themselves out of business. They would like the web to be an equal 100% first-class participant, just like a native application. And in fact, we're starting to see that a little bit more. They just recently announced several of the, what we call the core plugins. These are things that extend Cordova, have been earmarked for deprecation because the browsers are now natively supporting them. We no longer need to monkey patch our browser to do things. I mean, we can go back a little further. Geolocation. For those of us who are old enough to remember, geolocation was not natively in the browser initially. So if we were doing Cordova work and we needed geolocation, we would have to use a plugin. That's no longer the case. It's built in. We're seeing that now with camera, the accelerometer, a few other things. So as we're starting to get more and more capable within our browser, our apps can actually start to sort of break free of this native capability. So And Ionic is a great option, one of many, to be able to use that UI layer to create native app-like experiences at the UI layer within a web platform. Because basically, we're just removing Cordova and just going straight to the web, which is fantastic because if you have an app for a variety of reasons that you can't get into, say, the Apple App Store, which has a review process or something of that nature, this is another way to deliver your content to the people who might want to use it. So, but out of the box right now, Ionic needs a little touching, a little love and care. Now, the principal benchmark with progressive web apps is your Lighthouse score. So this is it's actually now formally baked into Google Chrome, but it will go through your web app and give you a score, actually several scores now, of how well your app will respond across various loads on networks, time to first paint, and a whole other metrics. So you can use that as a checklist on making the best possible web app experience that you can. So here's an example. San Diego, we have just a few craft beers floating around. And every year, Stone Brewery, which is one of the bigger ones, has an annual beer fest up at Cal State San Marcos. And a bunch of my friends, we go every year. We're also Untapped users. So Untapped, if you're not familiar with it, is a mobile app as well as a web app, which is a social check-in recommendation solution for beer drinkers, also built on Ionic. And actually, Greg, the CTO of Untapped, is actually speaking at PhoneGap Day, so should be a great talk. But here's a situation of, by the time we get the beer list and this sort of thing, trying to get into the Apple App Store, because my friends are mixed. I got some Android friends, I got some iOS friends. I don't have any Windows friends anymore. But trying to have this application to basically, as we're wandering around this beer festival, to easily check in on Untapped saying, how we rated each of the beers. So, at a normal parcel, Untapped actually has the ability to pull up the camera, I can scan the barcode. It actually might be a bar that uses Untapped, and I can check in real easy. Here I'm walking around with a little 3-ounce little glass, and everything's coming out of kegs. It's really hard. So I said, I can slap together a little progressive web app. It's not that hard. I have a data set to be able to just pull this up, find the brewery, find the beer that they have there, boom, check in. So that's what I did. But how do I make this work as best as possible? So here's a sort of a list of things that you would want to do. Believe it or not, gzip was not enabled on the web host I was hosting this on. So making sure that's turned on. That right there boosted up my Lighthouse score. So depending on what your web server is running, make sure it is. So all I do is turn this on, boom, I think I gained 10 points on my Lighthouse score. iOS. So the default index HTML that Ionic ships with does not have these 3 meta tags. So these are 3 Apple iOS-specific web tags that you can drop in. So when you basically save the web page as a web clipping onto your iOS device, it's going to start to behave a little nicer and look nicer. It's going to know how to handle the status bar, the title, and those sorts of things. Apple is sort of the latecomer to the progressive web app scene. We're starting to see some positive movement towards supporting it. Mostly this concept of service workers seems to be maybe coming into the iOS world, which is kind of like the secret engine of progressive web apps behind the scenes.
It's actually confirmed now too, so that's good. And actually, I'm glad you side note. I'm going to do it today real quick to add this stuff by default. So, because it should
hold on. What did you? I didn't hear all of what you said.
Oh, so I was saying service workers is confirmed to coming to Safari. It's a little.
What?
Yeah.
When?
Like a couple of months ago. But yeah, that's going to be come by default in Safari. It's still a ways out. It's in Safari Technical Preview, but it's doesn't really do much of anything. Like the namespaces are there, but it just kind of like fails with like this hasn't been implemented yet. But it actually is coming.
For real?
Yeah.
For real. For real.
Yes. I have been waiting. Like when I first found out about PWAs, I was super excited. I thought that was awesome. But then they said, well, yeah, but not on iOS. And I was like, what?
I think you asked me about it on Twitter. And yeah, I at that time I had to tell you that this long convoluted answer about how like hoping it's coming, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, now it's official that it's coming. And the other side note, I wanted to thank you, Chris, for putting together this slide, because this actually should be our default. So I'm going to do a commit while you continue your talk to put this stuff in by default.
There's the live coding.
We're making history right now, you guys.
There's that whole thread we have on that Slack channel a while back with things I wanted. So
yes, and I think this is one of them too, actually.
Yeah.
There you go.
So you also have this in. So since Apple doesn't support progressive web apps totally, but they've actually supported sort of the notion of web apps for a long time. Actually, if you actually go back and actually watch the original iPhone keynote, remember there was no app store. Everything was supposed to be web applications in the beginning. So, we've actually had this sort of available within the DNA. It's been buried and forgotten about because everyone rushes to the App Store, but this is still there. So Apple actually has Apple Touch icons that you can put in. So that's how it handles its icon system as opposed to a progressive web app. So you kind of like still have to deal with both sides. So basically just dropping in a whole bunch of these app icons. Now what's nice is part of the Ionic CLI, it has a generate resources command. It's Ionic Cordova resources. And it will look inside the resource folder into hopefully a very large icon file, and it's also a splash screen file, and generate the 32 on iOS and how many over on Android icons for you. So you don't have to sit there and resize, and get carpal tunnel syndrome in Photoshop saving out your icons. So literally you just have to go through and look in that resource folder and just, oh, it's this and this, and copy, 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 and away you go. So now another thing that Lighthouse measures, I just want to notice that, is this concept of meaningful first paint. So, and Apple actually is sort of the king of that. The reason why Apple has a splash screen is a sort of like a magician's trick. It's a sleight of hand. Apple apps don't really launch faster than an Android app, but with that splash screen coming up, you're distracted. Please ignore the man behind the curtain, the person behind the curtain, while we're actually launching your application. And Lighthouse kind of looks at that the same way. When do I actually get something on the screen so that users know, oh, something's working, something's going on? Because unfortunately, people are really bad judges of time. Even though time is linear, we do not count it as linear. But if you're in the UX world, you know all about this. So by having something on the screen, you can actually have something take longer, but by having something on the screen, they actually will believe it took less time. So the first paint allows us, that's what they're kind of measuring there. So I went ahead and added this inline style. Felt a little dirty doing it because inline style is bad. But by doing this, I don't have to go out and load a bit of CSS. I basically can put something up immediately as it can draw as quickly as possible and start to move on. So, and believe it or not, one of the other metrics within the Lighthouse score is what happens if for some reason JavaScript is off. So I quickly slapped in the good old no script tag in there. Not that I expected the app to be able to do anything without JavaScript, but just by having the no script tag in there, I got a few more points. So the other thing is, by default right now, and I know the Ionic team is, especially, if you don't know, Justin, who's on the panel, has been really instrumental within the Ionic team, really exploring the whole progressive web app space. So, hopefully he'll correct me if I get anything wrong. But right now, out of the box, the Ionic starter templates, and there are many of them, all ship with a set of Cordova plugins in there. Well, we're not deploying to Cordova. So what you want to do is actually you want to jettison them. And what that will do is not only speed up the build times, but you'll want to go through your code and pull them out, because actually inside the actual starter templates, there's actually a couple of calls for both the splash screen and the status bar. You want to make sure you pull those out, and that way there's not even an error. And you can also pull out all the interfaces to it. And actually going further, ripping out all of Cordova. So this is kind of all baked in when you generate an Ionic app. Since we're not touching Cordova, we can jettison all three of these things. And if you're not familiar with what this Ionic Native thing is, so Cordova plugins, these are JavaScript interfaces to native code, actually Objective-C, Swift, or Java that would run side by side, giving us access to the phone's capabilities. Ionic Native are Angular TypeScript interfaces to those things. So since we're not talking Cordova, we can even jettison Ionic Native out of here, since we're not really touching anything. And again, every little module we load in takes time. So the more we can jettison, the faster we can boot, faster we can get to painting onto the screen.
And just to interrupt real quick, Chris. So we are with all the new stuff that I don't want to talk about right now because it would take up the whole talk to explain all the new stuff we have coming. But anyways, that is going to be a default thing that's kind of built into the CLI, so that will all that kind of manual work that Chris just went over will be just automatically done by the CLI.
Hey, Justin, I think we're going to have to book you to come back another time and tell us all the cool stuff. You're hinting at it, and it's like, you can't tease us like that. You're going to have to come back and just some cool stuff.
Definitely, for sure. I agree.
You just volunteered yourself. Sorry. It happens that fast, man. Sorry, Chris. It's hard for us to be quiet because we're excited. This is like really cool stuff, and there's so much new stuff going on. So I'll be quiet.
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally excited about the stuff that's coming down with Ionic 4 and everything. So,
and I would like to thank Chris too, because he's a lot of the actually a lot of the ideas, Chris, that you came up with within that list on Slack, and then that issue that was opened on GitHub. A lot of those kind of ideas is stuff that we're playing around with building into the CLI. So just goes to show that community input actually does have an impact on what goes on internally.
Way to go, Chris.
Way to go.
Well, I mean, that is actually one thing I throw the love back onto you guys as well. The fact that you are so community involved. I've worked with projects where it's just radio silence, and it's nice to be able to have the interchange. It's a lot of fun.
I agree.
Especially Justin. Justin, you might be my favorite. You're super cool. Don't tell the rest of them that I said that, though.
I'm super cool over the computer, but yeah, this is my safe spot, right?
This was one that actually got me a little head scratching. So I'm compile, deploy, run Lighthouse, get my score, and it'll tell you, it's really nice, what's misbehaving. And I know what to do now because I have a feeling it'll probably screw up the Google Hangouts, so I'm not actually running it. But it was yelling about my images. I'm like, wait, because one of the requirements really for a progressive web app is it has to be served over HTTPS. And it was yelling that my images weren't. There was some redirection stuff. So I actually did have to go in and give the full URL, and that sort of magically solved it. So somehow, either through the relativeness baked inside how it was all getting put together with the templates, something wasn't working right, but I wasn't smart enough and to figure out what was going on inside, and solved it. And plus, I was thinking about all the delicious beer I was going to have that day. So, but the big thing, obviously, and this is baked into the index.html right now, is this little bit of code enabling service workers. Now, by default right now, it is commented out. So it literally is just a matter of opening that index HTML, turning off the comments, and boom, this will get the service worker started. And pretty much that's going to solve most things that you're going to do, especially with a simple app I was building. You can do a lot with service workers. There's a really good book coming out from O'Reilly on service workers that really dives into all its capabilities, with the, install prompts, push notifications that live inside here, caching stuff, redirecting stuff. I mean, this thing is an unsung hero. It's a great workhorse. I'm just barely begun to tap onto it. But basically turning this on, basically, if you did one thing only, you turn this on and poof, you're now a progressive web app.
Hey, Chris, can I stop you for a second? Because the service workers was something that I kind of had to learn. I didn't understand that term when I first heard it. And I know you're going through all this, which is really cool because we have a lot of beginners that watch this. So I just want to check in with Rob and Denny. Do you guys understand why we're so excited about service workers? And are you guys, I want to make sure that, because I didn't know when I first heard about it, but you guys know about service workers?
No, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, my impression of them is it's kind of like a background thread, a connection to a website or something where you can do some background processing. But what confuses me about the Ionic one that I've seen so far is how does it know what to do? How do you take control of it? What is it doing by default? And how would you know how to influence what it does?
Can I go first and give them the super simple beginner and then you can come in with the actual legit definition of service workers. So the reason I'm super excited about service workers is because I saw a thing. It was Jeff Cross and Alex years ago at ngConf. They were talking about this progressive web app thing, right? Which is basically I'm going to let Justin give you the real definition, or Chris, either one of you could speak to this better than I could. But basically, what it is it's a website. It's a web application that sits on your phone, and you can bookmark it like a home screen. So it looks just like a mobile app, except it's written like a web app, right? And so it actually mimics a web app very much. So you basically have a website, just like you would write your code for your browser that you've been doing all this time. But you write it in such a way with the progressive web app with really not a whole lot of changes to your code. It just acts very much like an app, including sending push notifications and all that interaction that you get from a native app. That's why the service workers is basically a little layer that communicates with the device. So that's how you write your browser code. But the service workers is what allows it to, say you're not looking at that page and the person has shut their phone off and you don't have it accessed, right? You don't have your screen up, but you want to send a push notification to say, hey, you just got a new message. Service workers is what allows you to do that. And so it's been working for a while on the Android platform, but it wasn't ready yet on iOS. So basically, that's why I'm so excited about service workers, because it's kind of important to get the progressive web apps working on the mobile sites. But Justin, you could follow that with that was probably a pretty clumsy beginner explanation.
No, that was great. That was great. So yeah, so how I like to describe service workers is it's basically a proxy between your app and the network. In the past, before service workers became a thing, reliability with a website to where, and by reliability, I mean I click on, twitter.com and it opens fast, no matter if I'm offline, if I'm in, a parking garage and have 3G, or if I, have perfect 4G LTE. There was no guarantee that there was going to be a reliable, I click on this app or I click on this link and it opens and I have my experience. So with service workers and the dynamic caching that enables you to do of your assets, that kind of brought this idea of reliability to the web, to where I can click on Twitter or I can click on Starbucks or all these other cool PWAs that are coming out. And I know that it's going to open and my user is going to be able to have that experience no matter what their network, because we all know mobile networks, even if you're on T-Mobile, which is great, it still sucks. So that's one of the biggest things about service worker. But the other cool things because service worker is a JavaScript worker and it's completely separate from your site. So even though it has control, it's like the proxy that sits between your site and the network. It's actually a completely like different thing that the browser controls. This allows you to do things like push notifications, because so traditionally with websites, push notifications wouldn't work because you have the site open. The JavaScript for the site is only running while you have it open. With service workers, we now have this JavaScript worker that the browser can fire up anytime it wants to, and it allows you to listen to events. So you can listen to the push event, and then when you get a push event from your server, you can open a push notification, and then you get a native push notification. Chrome just fires up the service worker real quick, sends a push notification, and there you go. And it also enables all kinds of other cool things like background sync and all this stuff. But good question about like how our service worker works, because it is kind of abstracted away, and we did that on purpose because service worker is very powerful, but also very very low level and will make you pull your hair out really fast. So we use this library called SW Toolbox currently. We're actually upgrading that to Workbox now, which is like the new SW Toolbox. But basically, it's a library that enables you to abstract away a bunch of the like really low-level APIs of service workers, and gives you just really like declarative way to say, I want to cache this asset and this asset, and I want to, you know, if my user has network, please, you know, pull the latest. But if it's offline, just go ahead and serve this cache data that I already have. So what our default service worker setup currently does is it goes ahead and pre-caches all the assets that are absolutely needed for your app. So like, you know, the JavaScript bundles for Angular and Ionic and the CSS and the icons, etc. It goes ahead and it sets a pre-cache for that, which basically says, okay, as soon as the user opens the app for the first time, go ahead and cache all these assets so that I can know that the next time they open the app, it's going to open no matter what the network is.
And it's going to do that automatically, like when you build an Ionic.
Yep, it does that automatically.
Out of the box. Out
of the box. Yep. As soon as you, every Ionic app you start has this little bit of a service worker registration code. You uncomment that, you instantly get this without even, like, you don't even have to look at the service worker file if you don't want to. Like, you don't even have to know it's there, really. Like, it's just, it's this thing that like we've handled for you. Like, it does cool things. That's all you have to know, right?
It's free.
You want to get like deeper into it.
Can you use
well,
it
we don't
for
want to
other things? Like, are you able to grab the service worker and use it as a separate thread, or use it for things other than caching?
So that's a good question. So no, because it doesn't. So just like any other web worker, it doesn't have access to DOM. Now it does have access to the IndexedDB API, and I've seen people do like cool like saving of you know, assets into IndexedDB that are like really crucial, and like you don't want to put into the cache API because it might get cleared out. But you wouldn't really, service workers aren't meant to be, because they're not like constantly running. They're only running when like Chrome like, or actually a better way to put it, they don't have any concept of like global permanent state. Because Chrome can say, I need the service worker fired up, and then Chrome can say, I don't need you anymore, so please go away.
Okay.
Because you don't want this entire service worker sitting there like eating up your CPU all day. You don't actually like it, you wouldn't want to use it because you don't know when it's going to go away. So you could be doing like some kind of cool, you know, figuring out like the next like 10 billion numbers of pi or something on your service worker, and then all of a sudden your service worker just gets blown away by Chrome because it doesn't need it anymore. And this is why it's all event-based too. Like everything happens based off an event, because it's only there, or it's only actually running for intermittent periods of time.
Cool, thank you.
So for like something you just expected, you would just use a web worker.
Awesome.
I want to get back on. I'm sorry, Chris. That was my fault because I totally.
Yeah,
I mean, this is really interesting, and Justin, you really need to come back and like just spend a whole hour like talk, because we have so many questions and this is really cool. But I really want to get to Chris's surprise.
Yes, I tend to ramble. So yeah, service workers, I could talk for hours about it and like ramble.
And we can listen for hours. Yeah, but. Honestly, I really want to. I'm not a patient person, so I want to see our surprise. But I also think that this is really good information. So I'm glad, Chris, that you're going through this slides. Like I said, we have beginners. This is really cool.
Me too.
Yeah.
And thank you, Justin, for that. Really, that was really cool.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, Justin tech reviewed the progressive web app section of the book, so I'm like, okay, definitely.
I was going to say, Chris, that's because there's more about service workers in your book, isn't there?
There's a bit more, and it keeps evolving. It's like what Justin was saying. You know, they're switching out the backend engine to Workbox, which is the new hotness.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot you can go in and really tune up and things you can do. Because like when Justin was describing it, it's basically a interface layer between your app and the network. So it could actually, intelligently say, for example, you were doing a hotel booking. If it knew it was offline, it could put up and from itself different HTML and handle itself differently, saying, I'm sorry, you can't book a hotel, you're offline. Try, here's a phone call. Call the reservation.
So for those of us cool kids who bought your book a long time ago, well, not a long time ago, it hasn't been out that long, but when we bought it, so you just keep updating it and we get those updates forever?
I don't know what O'Reilly does. I'm sorry. Yeah.
You said you've had updates. Is that for people that buy the book from here on out, or what about the people that already bought the book? What about the people that ran out and bought it immediately?
You have to ask O'Reilly. Actually, I do not know. I actually did publish on the Ionic2book.com site, which is the companion site, all the little deltas that'll happen, and then basically we folded that in back into the electronic and dead tree version.
Right. I think I saw that because I didn't buy it when it first came out. I bought it and there were already updates when I bought it. And
that team up in Madison keeps moving forward faster and faster, and it's hard to keep pace with them.
Yep.
So, and it's a lot of fun. So another thing baked in. So if you've done any Cordova work, there's this file in there called the config XML, which defines a lot of your app parameters. Progressive web apps have the same thing. Theirs is a JSON file, since XML is evil and such. So we have a simple JSON file that's shipped as part of the template. Now, what you need to do is it actually doesn't pick up any information at the moment. So you need to actually open it up and just fill out a few things like, your app's real name, its short name, which can't be more than 12 characters. You can change the display mode. You can tell what icons you want to use. You can get different sizes if you want to get real fancy. Some stuff about the background color and theme colors. This is how it creates its fake splash screen, and you also define its orientation. There's some other more abstract parameters. But by setting this, something that understands the manifest JSON file, which is, said it's baked in the Ionic template, this is what starts making it even become a little nicer. So on an Android phone, when I basically save to the home screen, this is what defines the icon and the names, some of the things there. So, but when all was said and done, this was actually my Lighthouse score. Now, I still had some performance problems, but everything else, the accessibility was good, pretty much followed all the best practices, and the overall score actually was 100. So, yay! Some of the performance.
We had somebody asking about Lighthouse in the chat, so I just posted a link to Lighthouse. If you guys haven't heard of Lighthouse yet, go, not right now, but when we're done here, go look at it because it's very cool. Yeah,
and what's nice is it used to be an extension, now it's actually baked into DevTools. So it's cool, it's right there. Some of the performance problems are really just some of the startup times, really of Angular, and also a little of Ionic. And this is actually one of the things that really drove the Ionic team to look at pushing toward because they're kind of hitting sort of a brick wall. I mean, it's always been a knock against Angular to some degree is the slow startup times. The Angular team's been working very hard on it, and actually, probably with Ionic 4, we've seen some stuff like with the stencil stuff that Justin knows very, very well. This new web compiled components and these sorts of things, that performance layer is just going to go lightning fast. So real excited about that. So, but that's just sort of, some stuff about the progressive web app world with Ionic, because since Ionic is this great UI layer, being able to actually write once and, for the most part, really start to hit a whole variety of platforms. So, but now I actually want to shift gears to another evil little project of mine, and that's the Ionic Native Mocks. So I've talked about this whole concept of Cordova plugins and briefly on Ionic Native. So right now there are some 1,200 plugins in the Cordova plugin registry. So odds are someone has probably written a plugin that's going to do the function that you need to do on the device that's not supported within the web browser. So, for example, Touch ID, OAuth, camera. I mean, there's just not a gazillion, gazillion's almost a real number, but there's so many of them out there. Now, like I was saying earlier, they're all written in JavaScript. The Ionic team this used to be known under a different project name called ngCordova, but when everything shifted over, it's now referred to as Ionic Native. These are TypeScript and Angular, really, interfaces to these same plugins. Now, the problem is, once you drop a plugin into your Ionic application, depending on what it is, you may no longer be able to run your application on your computer in your browser. So what sort of started this for me was I was working on a project where we were using the barcode scanner. We were scanning in QR codes to assemble product kits that you would, so the security panels, some door window sensors, we have an alarm system. A person would kit all this together from the dealer, send it out to the person, and they would install it. So I was working on a prototype, but I actually wanted something a little more real. Well, the first step almost in the flow for the user to use this application is, sign in, okay, that's easy to fake. Pull up the barcode scanner and talk to the camera. Oh, fudge. I'm kind of stuck. I can't do this in the browser anymore. So my rapid workflow of VS Code, browser off to the side, back and forth, coding, checking, fell apart because now I'm either going to have to send it out to the emulator or the simulator, my platform, or actually onto a real device. Now, there are some better pipelines, things have gotten better sending back and forth, but it's still not as lightning fast as being just right there in my browser. So the concept of the mocks is to simulate and mock out all the interfaces for that Ionic Native plugin. So what I can do, install out there in NPM, I can go out and install the mock, which is a one-to-one matching to the Ionic Native, pull that in, and then wrap it over. So I can either just pull this in directly through NPM, and then you're just going to get the generic result, or if you manually pull it in, you can actually then go into the TypeScript definition, and if you want a custom return, so it actually makes sense, like in my case, that's what I was doing. Rather than just returning a valid but empty value for the barcode scanner to work, I actually returned a fixed decoded value back into my system, so it acted like I really did scan. And do that manually, then tweaking along. And the way it all works is actually we just step into our app.module.ts file and then just reroute the providers. So you pull in the native one, then you pull in the mock, and then you just basically override it while you're in development and saying, hey, go ahead and use the camera, but instead you're going to use this mock instead, and you can keep on moving, keep on trucking. So, so this is a little snippet of a sample component, or screen if you would, with Ionic code. So I'm pulling in camera, but the behind the scenes actually using that mock, so I can do everything I would normally do with the Ionic Native Camera plugin, but not have to use it. So, if you're into testing and really moving fast, this is a nice little fun little project. So
I feel like I want to interrupt you.
Oh.
Every 2 seconds, I want to interrupt you just to say, "Oh, that's so cool."
Yeah, it's been fun. Right now, I think there are about 164 plugins in the Ionic Native library, and then I keep an eye on an Ionic team either updates a function or adds a plugin, because there are some that are in beta, and I'm sure as people sort of clamor, "Hey, will someone please write this?" You know, I'll get around and popping it in.
That's so cool. When do you sleep, Chris?
Oh, I do.
Does this actually use, like, does it use get user media to actually like get actual image data, or is it just returning like?
Right now, it'll return like an empty string.
Okay, cool.
And this was a debate I was having. Leek Wells was kind of helping him out a little bit on this. So we're debating what to do on, what do we return? Do we become very opinionated and return something, or do we just keep it, very vanilla? And we opted for the vanilla option because, for this, we could have just, say, taken the Ionic logo, turned it into, a base 64 string and return that. Or, for example, we wanted to access the contacts database, so that you use a plugin if you want to actually use and interface with the contacts that are on your phone. We don't return, I'm saying we return anyone, but we could have returned someone. But when it's all compiled and coming off at NPM, it's very hard to go in and unhook and rewire something. So we'd rather stay vanilla with all our returns. And if you wanted to have something custom to kind of have your app work in a more proper flow, like I was saying, I wanted the QR code to be decoded, but it always decoded the same string. Be able to go in and just implement that in yourself. I actually have a blog post on like, how do you customize an Ionic Native Mock for yourself?
Yeah, I can see stacking that right into automated tests would be just amazing. I mean, get much more coverage over your code base that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I ran into this a year or two ago, and it was, and I really could not figure out how to handle that in my unit tests. Of course, I was still kind of learning unit tests at that time, so I wasn't too great at it, but it was really difficult. And what I love about this, especially because it's on GitHub, because this is so simple that, like, say I don't want to return an empty string, I want to return something specific, right? But I can just look at your code, and it's so clear, and you've got the comments in there and the console log, that I can take that and copy that and write exactly what I want, because now I know what the syntax is. This is beautiful. Thank you, Chris. That's awesome.
Cool. So the surprise. So I wrote
any sound effects.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
A new Electron app, and you guys are actually the first real people in public to see this. It's an Ionic app generator. So it's an Electron application for both Mac and Windows. And actually the UI layer is actually Ionic. And the idea is to allow you to fill in all the properties to generate your app, not only from the just basic start command, but we decided to extend it to going in and editing that manifest JSON file that I was talking about, the config XML file, which is used by Cordova, and then some plugin management. So here, let me just show you the real thing.
Hey, Chris, real quick technical question.
Yeah.
Because I'm like super interested in how this works under the hood. So does this actually call like our CLI or?
Yes, it calls your CLI. So that is kind of like the one requirement is, yeah, you need to have the Ionic CLI in there. And it's incredible when you actually read documentation about fun little flags that you didn't know existed or pay attention to.
Very
like -- no interactive. Which was driving me crazy.
Service worker coming. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
Yeah, maybe.
I am nerding out so much here right now because this is like super exciting.
So I can just say ngHouston. since this is an Ionic app, I have access to the desktop and sort of things like that. I can say my Ionic type. So right now it's Ionic Angular. I can choose my templates. So right now for Ionic applications, I have blank side menu tabs, the Super Template Conference, and AWS. But if I change, say, actually back to Ionic 1, I have the Ionic 1 templates available to me. But I want the new hotness. Blank is fine. I can give it an app name. So, I will turn the NPM and Yarn dependencies off because that takes a while. And I'll turn off the Git repo. And let's go ahead and put on a platform. So this screen right here basically is just giving us a GUI to the Ionic start command. And part of it was I could never remember, okay, it was -- what? And I'm like, oh boy, and I wrote a book on this thing and I can't remember. So this lets me just kind of, quickly scaffold this up. And it was kind of an interesting sort of thought experiment that became reality. And I flip over to Progressive Web App, I can go in and say, type this in. And I will be actually writing some blog posts around this. So like one of the things I went in, like over here for theme color. So I actually, it's out there in my GitHub repo, I actually have a CSS validator for Angular now. So if I just said that, it actually will yell at me and it knows. But if I actually wanted to change the background color, it actually knows the entire system. For example, Rebecca Purple is a valid CSS color and it knows it. If I wanted to define the icons, I can go ahead and do that. Going around, but actually we'll pull the icon, figure out its size, and change the display mode, orientation, some of those things. And if I flip over to the Cordova side, these are some, but not nearly all of some of the Cordova elements. So I think I've released this little but actually a little regex here. So if I wanted to put this all in, which is needed, app version, all this stuff in. Some of the things I've been looking at, like maybe saving this information, that sort of thing. You're how to contact me. I'll share that.
On the color stuff for the manifest, have you thought about using the HTML5 color picker, the color input type color or whatever it is?
I had not. Most people are probably just picking that up. Some of it was the chips in time. So
gotcha.
I hadn't fully played with it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And like, well, of course, for the Electron, you don't have to worry about it because it's just Chrome anyways.
Right.
But like the cross browser stuff with the input type color is like, yeah, it's kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, this nice thing about living inside Electron is like you're kind of you have a safe sandbox to play with.
Exactly.
And, I can change any intents I want to play with. This is all right now basically the functions within the default config XML that Ionic ships with. Part of the reason, the evil genius behind all this, Genesis, I should say, I can't choose. Genesis behind it is I wrote another tool which I need to update called config gap, written on AngularJS, also an Electron app, which is a much more robust editor for phone gap builds config XML, because they used to be very divergent, and now they're converging, so now it's a matter of coming back. So it's like I'm somewhat familiar with this. I can come in.
Feature requests coming in already on the chat.
Yeah, good.
We're still debut. You haven't even finished the debut, and you've got feature requests already.
Scope creep.
Develop faster, Chris.
So here are all the Ionic Native plugins. So, and if I wanted to put something in, let's say I wanted device motion, I can just pop that over there. And then some plugins actually are kind of interesting. I think it's Amazon. Oh, I know. Here we go. That search looks at Facebook. And actually, Facebook actually has some parameters that need to be set, so I can just pull that in and actually define my parameters, and it should generate the right command and do its magic and make it all work. So, especially if I'm scaffolding and I know I'm going to need some functionality out of the box, I can come into this interface and go there. And of course, I had to give myself my own plug to include the native mocks. And then if everything's all good, we get the green lights. Now, you don't have to do anything for the progressive web app stuff. Cordova and the plugins, so if you actually didn't touch any of those screens, and if you just wanted to just have a GUI to scaffold up, that would work. So you don't have to fill out all of these screens and all the forms and make all those decisions. And then it's just a matter of hitting generate app. And then it's just going to start running behind the scenes and running all those commands for you. So
also say another plug for Ionic Angular 4. The installing npm install will be, should be, I shouldn't say will be because you never know what happens. Should be a lot faster since we're actually like the Ionic components themselves will be going from like, 2 kilobytes for a component, for like a small, like simple component down to like probably like 800, 900 bytes. So it should be a lot faster npm install.
Right. It's having trouble getting the app base. I don't know, but as you can see, we're starting to get the bits and pieces. There's the resource folder I was talking about. And slowly chucking away. Yes.
While that builds, another comment from the peanut gallery for the beginners. I actually got to sneak peek on this a couple days ago, and that's why it's been so hard for me to keep my mouth shut, because I got to play with this and it was really cool and I was excited. But for those of you who are beginners, there were a couple of screens where you can customize a lot of different options, but I was able to just basically name it and then just hit the defaults all the way through and create, because like I just wanted to see, like I wanted to make a super simple app just to see how it all worked. And I was able to do that. So if you didn't understand all those little options that he just walked through, that's okay. That's okay. You can just like make it a name and click, and it'll work.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that's at some point tooltips explaining what does minimal UI mean for a progressive web app and those sorts of things. But that wasn't part of the MVP.
Yeah, that would be super helpful because like especially with the all the different display types on the manifest, like I literally have to look up those every time. Like it's Google it every time, just because, yeah, the names for those aren't very, except for standalone, aren't very
right.
Specific.
That makes me feel much better about myself, Justin. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh no. Trust me, like 70% of like what I do is like Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
Any
We're
app
all the same.
It's Stack Overflow.
I felt like I was really, I really turned a milestone in my career when my Google searches started taking me, instead of Stack Overflow, I started going to open GitHub issues, which was cool because I'm like, now I'm literally on the bleeding edge, except it's good because it's cool, but it's bad because these GitHub issues are not resolved yet. So like, what am I supposed to do? Wait.
One weird thing that
or open a PR.
You have to solve it, and then you have to.
So you say.
One weird thing I run into is like looking up, so I'll run into something really weird with like Angular or something, looking it up and then finding a GitHub issue on the Ionic repo, and then like looking through, I've commented on that and I'm like, man, I should. it's really
from like 4 days ago.
Yeah.
well, the best part is when you find them, like, okay, good, it's not just me, it's not something I did. I was actually having trouble with an issue. I'm like, oh, is it me? Oh, no. It happened over here too. Good. It's not with my setup.
It's some validation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, except when you try to go tell your boss that, and he's like, no.
So it's slow and
we were waiting on me.
We're on some plugins now. I'm just chugging on along. So again, you know,
So will it, depending on the options, it will install more or less, or do you think this is pretty consistent? Because I could be crazy, but it seemed like it went a little bit quicker when I was doing this the other day. But I just did like super basic.
the version you played with did not install the platforms. So
So it's like a preview demo version.
Is one of the bigger ones.
So it wasn't finished. The one that you sent me wasn't finished because I already sold it.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
So yeah, so that one didn't install. The platforms definitely increased the install time. So yeah, it's all ready to rock and roll. I don't like launch it for you or do anything like that yet. But if I go over to it, I got a 100-piece app. So if I actually just go over to it.
Now I've been on the RxJS and GRX GraphQL kick lately, so I have not built an Ionic app in a couple months. Do we still need a Mac to build for iOS, or we have a workaround for that? That might be a dumb question.
Well, actually, never truly needed a Mac. You could use something like PhoneGap Build or Ionic Pro and have them doing the building. However, the last tiny little bit actually of uploading it to the Apple App Store is still a Mac only thing. So you literally can get all within the last inch.
Yep. So yeah, we have our Ionic package service that is part of the Ionic Pro suite that we have now, which if you haven't checked out, you should go check out. If you just go to ionicframework.com, you'll see, I think there's like a pro link up in the top header. But there's an Ionic package link which allows you to, except for the little part that Chris mentioned. And the cool thing is once you get access to a Mac once and set that up, unless something changes, like you change something or something, you shouldn't need to access that again. And then you can actually just use Ionic package to build your app for iOS from a Windows or a Linux machine.
So that's a paid service that Ionic offers?
Yes.
Is it cheaper than a Mac?
Oh, but
so then we can just borrow a Mac, and so if you want to be a developer and you want to do this Ionic stuff, you can borrow a Mac for a day, and then from then on you can just use the Ionic package service.
Or go to Best Buy.
Yeah, or if you have lots of money, you could just buy a Mac. That's cool too.
Well, or just go to Best Buy and check out some of the demo Macs.
Oh yeah, you could do that. That's clever.
Well,
I'm with you now. What's that, Chris?
Keychain access over there. I mean, yeah, you can rent the Mac. There's Mac in the cloud. I mean, there are ways to get around it, but yeah, you're kind of the best bet is find an older Mac Mini or something. But then you're always getting the trouble of when a new iOS updates. Okay, what does Xcode now need and all of that? So there's a horse race about it.
Yeah, and that's
don't actually follow these suggestions, you guys. This isn't.
So here I pulled up the app that we built here, and we can actually see it's built in my ID here, my author email, the config XML. If I go into the source and then manifest JSON, it's all written out for me. So I don't have to remember to come back and think about it, so it was just kind of a fun experiment of just playing around with it.
This is very cool. Very, very
That's
cool.
awesome. Yeah, yeah.
It's also a good example of using Ionic and Electron, which people ask about a lot, so I like it.
There are the URLs, so I'll put my real blog post together later tonight, but it's been a lot of fun playing with it. Some of the things I learned were a lot of the interesting switches way down inside some of the build scripts. For example, when you run Ionic, it will build into a www directory, but Electron kind of wants things in a different place, and so running these two development systems in parallel didn't fully get it worked out with some of the library loading. I still have to look into some of that. but to have the Ionic build scripts change where it builds to. So that was like a little discovery. I mentioned real briefly, there's this -- no interactive flag in the CLI. So if you've been using Ionic, you know, especially with the new CLI, it's super helpful because, hey, there's a new version, you want to upgrade. There's a lot of prompts guiding you through, especially if you're not comfortable working with a CLI, if it's kind of a new world to you. Unfortunately, those questions were killing the node process underneath. So once I found that, so I was to basically turn off the help, if it were, to let the system kind of chug along. That was some of the fun little challenges in working with two systems. So
the other thing I like about this too is like, so as Dan, who is our main CLI person at Ionic, like he puts out tons of CLI, like he's always updating the CLI and making it better for our users. But what's cool is like, since this is using our CLI under the hood, like all those improvements and like performance improvements, like and you know, install times, et cetera, like automatically get your builder automatically like gets that just because it's using the CLI under the hood.
Right.
Cool.
It's one of the things I did not do is I did not bake the CLI into the Electron app. So
although that would have been cool to see that work.
Well, sadly, let's see. I'm going to New York for Phone Gap Day, then Adobe Max, so you know some development's going to have to be on hold.
For sure.
And plus, I'm trying to hike the 100 peaks of San Diego County, so that takes up a little time. So, and of course, I wrote an Ionic app to help the catalog if I've summited or not yet.
That's cool. Is it
I love this.
So that's all I got. So thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me kind of reveal this little project to the world rather than just a blog post. I'm like, I don't know if everyone ever reads.
I love this. I'm glad that you did this here. I feel very special. I'm glad I made friends with you because you're pretty cool. I was looking at this stuff that you're building going, oh, wow. So yeah, now I'm cool by association because I know you. So now we're all cool because we got to see this first, brand new. It's pretty exciting. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. Do you guys have any questions for Chris or Justin?
Yeah. I just want to take a step back and make sure I understand what we kind of just generated there. Did we generate the files with which would be able to produce a web application that's also a progressive web application, as well as the source code that we could package as a native app for iOS? Is all of that generated? Like there's two different versions of the same application?
So it generated the start of it. I gotta look at this area a little bit. So we have the platform installed. So for a second. So when we told it to put platform in, we actually got our iOS platform. So I can now run the Ionic CLI and say Ionic Cordova build iOS, and it will build a native iOS application.
Okay.
If I can say Ionic build, it's basically just going to build its web version.
Okay.
Or if I just run Ionic serve, sort of same thing, and run it up in the web browser and get rocking and rolling.
Okay.
So, like normally, what I would have had to have done, for example, I would have had to. This file would be generated by the Ionic CLI, but it's going to be filled with just their stuff.
Okay. Right.
So here I'm also kind of like raising a little awareness.
Yep.
At the beginning. And same thing with the config XML, filling out various little bits and pieces here, same thing.
Yeah, and those are the components that support progressive web apps, right?
The manifest one, yes. And the config XML is for the native applications.
Okay, gotcha.
And so
if I want to use a plugin, I'm doing it right here rather than going to the Ionic docs and going, what are the parts? because it's actually installing both the plugin as well as the Ionic Native wrapper for it. So it's a two.
Okay.
And so the cool thing is too, like, so when you do just like an Ionic build, just to like build the web app / PWA version, like it doesn't matter that the config XML is there, right? Because it's the CLI is smart enough to know that, like, okay, I'm not building the Cordova version of the app, so I don't need to care about the config XML or any of the plugins or anything like that, or build like the iOS platform or anything like that. In the Ionic Cordova build, that's kind of like our Cordova platform, we call it, in the CLI. And that's when basically when you say Ionic Cordova, that tells the CLI that it needs to build the Cordova pieces of it. So it needs to look at the config and know which platform to build the native platforms that you have installed. But because all the Ionic code is just all of our stuff is just components built on Angular and JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and soon web components. So it goes even closer to the metal of the browser. It works just anywhere. So like in Electron with Chris's app here, with Chris's PWAs that he's built, and in a Cordova app too, like Untapped, where it's in the App Store, and you download it just like you would Facebook or something.
Hey Justin, there's we have Yogan in the chat who wants to know, how is the build different using Ionic Serve and Ionic Cordova build browser? And also about new upcoming. Yeah, there's a couple questions in the chat. If you have, do you have the chat open?
I don't.
I'm gonna paste these into our Hangout chat so you can see, because he's got a couple questions.
So on
Yogan, you should come and join us on the panel sometime.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What about new upcoming Ionic using? Okay. So the first question is what about new upcoming Ionic using Polymer / web components? So we're not actually, so first let me explain what Polymer is. So Polymer is a library built on top of web components that basically allows you to build web components. So it's just like so jQuery allows you to, build, or jQuery mobile allows you to build, web apps that have a mobile interface. Polymer allows you to build web components, but with some nice stuff like data binding and stuff like that on top. But at the end of the day, once you build your Polymer component, it's just a web component. But we're not actually using Polymer. We're actually using a thing that we built called Stencil, which allows you to, is the same concept. It's just a library, very, very tiny library that allows you to build web components. But at the end of the day, once you npm run build, it just outputs a web component. That's going to be coming in Ionic Angular 4. All the Ionic components will be web components that we ported using Stencil. But the Ionic Angular, all the Angular goodness that you get will still be there. And I'll try to answer these a little faster. So Ionic Cordova build browser and Ionic Serve. So Ionic Serve just does a simple dev build of the application and opens up, as Chris has opened here, a window running on localhost at 8100 in your browser. This is going to live update as you make changes in your HTML, TypeScript, and CSS. And this is kind of like the general development flow. With Ionic Cordova build browser, we actually don't recommend that you use the Cordova browser platform because frankly, it's pretty buggy. And it actually wasn't ever meant to be like an actual platform to start off with anyways. It was meant to actually do some of the mocking stuff that Chris has built out in Ionic Mocks, in my opinion, better than the browser platform handles it. So the actual command that you would want to run if you were wanting to build a web app or a PWA with Ionic would be, it's actually not Ionic build anymore. It's npm run Ionic :build -- prod. And that will give you the application that you can the PWA that you can run in the browser, but not using the Cordova browser plugin. It's Cordova plugin for serve.
And the -- prod will tell Angular and everything to build it in the production mode as opposed to the development mode. So again, picking up some performance benefits.
Yep, exactly. And then the last one, browser build adds Cordova plugins. So so this goes back to the browser platform. It does add the plugins, but it's basically like trying to mock them. the Cordova browser platform was originally meant to be used for like, you wanted to like, kind of like Chris whenever with his mocks, you wanted to continue developing your app by using Cordova plugins, but you didn't want to have to use Ionic Emulate and stuff like this. You just wanted to keep being able to build it in the browser. That's what it was originally meant for. So you will see it add the Cordova plugin, but it frankly just, I love Cordova, but the browser plugin just doesn't work very well. Yeah, whereas Serve won't add the plugins because it's literally just doing a dev like web build of the app, if that makes sense. And yes, the PWA gets built into the www folder. So we actually, I've been working with Jorge Vergara, who is an awesome blogger in the Ionic community. And we have a blog coming out that me and him collaborated on next week to explain this more. But yeah, the PWA gets built into the www folder. And then that's the www folder is what you would want to push to your web hosting service. I recommend Firebase for right now, since it's just npm install the CLI and Firebase deploy, and there's the PWA. But yeah.
It's a good thing that we're a small meetup, because I think if the general internet knew that Justin Willis was sitting here answering questions about Ionic, Justin, you would be stuck here all night. It would just be faster than you come in. So you guys don't tell anybody. We'll just meet here every week and try to keep it on the down low.
No, I don't mind answering questions at all.
Yeah, you're gonna have to come back, Justin. We haven't had you here before, but you're definitely gonna have to come back because you're awesome. Definitely, and Chris, you're definitely gonna have to come back too, because that's like as fast as you can build stuff. Just come here anytime and say, "Hey guys, I got something new to show you," and we're just gonna clear the calendar for you guys because this is so much fun.
And Chris's books, his books are amazing. Very, very good content. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very good.
Well, I actually have a book on Electron coming soon. Co-wrote it with Lee Wells, so from A-Press. So got that coming.
What is soon? What defines soon?
It is now with the publisher. They're now doing their layout cleanup. We have not had our final author review yet to make sure they didn't, everything, line breaks are in the right spot and all of that. So
that's awesome.
Also,
I like it because.
So this is actually the code for the Ionic generator here. I actually wanted to point out. So here's that www folder that when I run the command to take this Ionic app right here, and it basically gets thrown inside this app folder that Electron is looking for. So that's the whole magic.
Is this open source, Chris? And I can't remember.
Not yet.
Okay. Because I would love to be able to point to this as like a, hey, how do I build an Electron app with Ionic? Oh,
I think I want to get the problem right now is I don't have live reloading.
Gotcha.
Once I sort of solve that, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, if you need help, just ping me on Slack and I can get you hooked up with Dan, and on his free time, he might be able to help you get that working.
Yeah.
This is so fun. And so the Electron book that you have coming out, is that like because what I liked about the Ionic book is it assumes like you don't have to know if you're like brand new, you've never done this before, then it just kind of walks you through everything that you need to know, which is because sometimes when I'm trying to learn something new and I'm Googling it and I'm going on Stack Overflow and all these blog posts, the problem is everybody teaches it slightly differently. And so there's sometimes different syntax across different blogs. And if you find a book from a reputable author that you know and trust, then it's cool because you can just kind of have one consistent path all the way through it. So the Electron book, is that okay for people who have no idea how to do Electron?
I mean, its official title is Electron from Beginner to Pro.
Awesome.
You take a different approach with it. So we do start pretty much at ground zero, moving forward. You never build an app in it, really. Because Electron is this framework in the same way like Cordova, it doesn't care about your UI. It doesn't care what framework you're writing your application in. So we went round and round, my co-author Lee and myself, going, okay, do we have you build an application and to showcase what Electron can do? It's auto-updating, how it actually does real menus and dialogues and alerts and all this cool things that we get to play with on the desktop that we haven't within our browser. But okay, now they'll get you sidetracked, and I have this little also with the app, in the logic of the app, but on what framework? Okay, if I write in Angular, well, the Angular crowd is happy, but the React.js people are going, I don't get it. Or the Vue.js people, I don't get it. Or do we then try to write it 3 times over for every framework and vanilla? And we basically say, the importance is not, how does the to-do app work, or whether or whatever it might be. Here's just what you need to know how to make a menu work. Or here's how auto-updating, and we leave the rest away for you. So it's kind of a different approach. So.
Okay, I was just checking with the chat to see if they had any more questions, and I think we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Denny, did you have a question? Oh, Denny's making fun of me in the chat. They give me a hard time because I send out invitations to the panelists, and it always says 3 hours, but I don't schedule these for 3 hours. It's because Meetup automatically, if I don't put an end time, it just defaults to 3 hours, but yeah, that's not my fault, Denny. Okay, so we're at the top. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, I had one question real quick, if you're okay with it. I was just curious. My brother and I mentioned earlier, are trying to create a mobile client for an existing web application, and I wonder if you have any suggestions on what we need to be looking at to help expedite, I guess, the data synchronization between the existing backend and the new client. Is there any plugin we should be looking at, or like a web worker, like you mentioned before, that will help facilitate some of that stuff?
So you have a database that's already being used for this mobile web application, and you use the same database for your Ionic app. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ideally, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that should work. So so just because Ionic is built on web, right? Like in your mobile web application, you're doing fetches to your requests to your APIs and getting data and posting data and all that good stuff. As long as most of that is just plain JavaScript, so just fetch API stuff. I mean, you should just be able to copy paste that to your Ionic app and get going. Because it is built on web technologies. And then you could actually port your mobile web interface to Ionic 2 if you wanted to.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, as long as it's just you shouldn't need any plugin or anything. It can just make fetch requests.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. But is there anything that would help with multi-client synchronization? That automatic updating, kind of like what Firebase would do for you, but
yeah, so I'm fixing to say Firebase. I mean, Firebase does have a backend API or a backend SDK. And Chris, you may be able to answer this better than I can. How I would do it is probably the convoluted way, but just off the top of my head, I would probably look into Firebase, their admin SDK, I guess that they call it, which is their backend server side SDK. And that would allow you to tie in your database to their real-time database. So you get all their cool real-time database updating and everything just syncs and it's all cool and stuff. But
GraphQL too.
What?
GraphQL.
Oh yeah, GraphQL. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would look to just, if you could and you had the time, just move your current database to something like Firebase or GraphQL.
Okay.
Yeah. Denny, Colette said in the chat to check out FireLoop.
FireLoop, okay.
Which I've never heard of, but Colette said it's cool.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks. I appreciate the suggestions. Thanks.
Yep, no problem.
Cool. All right, guys, I think we're going to come to an end. And you guys do me one favor, because my dear daughter, Samantha, said I was a total nerd because I was super excited about this Ionic app generator. So y'all go tell Samantha it's actually very cool, and I'm not a nerd. I mean, I am a nerd, but, I'm not the only one excited about this. So, yeah. Chris, thank you so much for showing us first. It's kind of exciting that we got to be the first ones to see this. And I think this is awesome. And Justin, thank you for coming on and giving us all your Ionic knowledge. And Rob and Denny, thank you as always for joining us. Yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, and by the way, we're not meeting next week because I'm flying to Florida for Angular Mix.
All right.
And Rob, you'll be there. I'll see you in Florida, right?
Yes, we will definitely have to hang out.
I have one last thing for Chris. So Chris, have you talked to anybody? Are you talking to anybody at Ionic about doing like a blog post on this generator?
Blog? Not yet.
Not yet.
If I need someone in dev relations, you know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was asking.
Maybe if I just at Mike.
Free to.
Think he'd respond?
Do what now?
If I went at Mike on Slack, you think he'd respond?
At Mike, yeah. He should respond.
Yeah, he loved that.
He was supposed to be here, and he offered Justin as a sacrificial lamb, which we appreciate.
Yeah. You can hit up Mike or I mean, I'm dev relations. Hit up me. I've been working with a few people on blog posts, so I would love to get one about this in too.
Will do.
There you go. All right, you guys, this was so fun. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you both. You both need to come back soon and often. All four of you, actually.
Will do.
Sounds good.
See you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.